curriculum fair. Because I've been a teacher for 11 years in CPS, and I've been to quite a few professional developments that I felt were a waste of my time. And so I always love coming to the fair because I get to be with real educators who teach children who look like the children in my classroom. I'm able to take back real tools and strategies on Monday back to my classroom. So again, I'm honored to be here. So I want to just start our conversation by talking about a conversation I overheard a month ago by a group of teachers. And they were discussing whether or not they should be involved in this work. And by this work, I mean the work of creating and developing critical and social just curricula and pedagogy. Now, they weren't saying that they should be doing it in their classrooms. They knew that. They just were saying, you know, we have so much on our plate, we're dealing with so much, we're fighting this corporate reform movement, we're fighting administrators in our building, we're fighting for a new contract. And so maybe we can leave, you know, creating socially just curricula up to people who are already doing this work, up to people like Teachers for Social Justice and Rethinking Schools, people who are doing this work quite well. And I just think in that conversation, those teachers were missing a couple of really important points. First, that the most important facets of any movement, any grassroots movement that is organizing. And we as teachers should be organizers. We should be thinking of ourselves as organizers. And a key piece of being an organizer is also education. Because the education is how you get people to move. So here's the second thing I think that those teachers were kind of missing out on, is that we should not only be thinking of ourselves as organizers, but as organizers who are trying to not only build a movement, but sustain a movement. Because the power of any movement is in its sustainability. And when we engage in socially just pedagogy and curricula, when we're educating and organizing our youth, that is how we are sustaining this movement. Because the youth, this is how we're going to move this movement to the next level. The youth are the ones who are going to advance this work with fearlessness. And we're going to need fearlessness, brothers and sisters, because this corporate enemy that we are fighting, they are on an all-out attack against youth of color. And they are seeking to destroy, consume Black and brown youth. This is total warfare. You know, total warfare was a concept brought by the Europeans to the Americas. The idea that you use whatever tactic, whatever strategy you can to destroy everything. You spare nothing. This is what we're dealing with. This war on our youth, it is all-encompassing. It is physical, it is psychic, it is emotional, it is psychological. You know, sometimes it's hard for us to wrap our minds around the fact that people will intentionally harm children. We just can't really wrap our minds around that. But while we were starving for 34 days, you know, that idea kind of, it became more real to me that this is an all-out war on our youth. Especially as people who have dedicated our lives to working with youth, we kind of have a trouble with wrapping our minds around the fact that people will intentionally harm children. But we must understand and be very clear that this system of corporate privatization of all that is public, it is a scheme and a ploy to protect and strengthen white supremacy and the status quo. And its main target is youth of color, and any and all people, organizations, institutions that will seek to protect these children. If this is not total war against our children, how else can you explain a police force that has been blatantly held unaccountable for physical deaths and murders of dozens of unarmed young people like Samir Rice and Rakia Moore? How can you explain food deserts in one of the richest cities in the world, in the richest countries in the world, neighborhoods that have zero grocery stores or healthy food options for their residents, many of whom are small children? Not only do they create food deserts physically, but they also make sure to deny access to quality food options by refusing to provide livable wages for workers who have families and young children. Try making less than $15 a day and going to Whole Foods or going to your local grocery store and shopping organically for a family of 5. You try it. Billion-dollar companies making money, billions of dollars on the cheap Black, brown, and immigrant labor, but deny livable wages to those workers. And then those privatizers attempt to suffocate the silence of the cries of those workers by making sure they have no labor unions or any kind of institution that would actually protect the rights of those workers. Not only are some of our neighborhoods in food deserts, though, brothers and sisters, we have schools, we have neighborhoods that are actually in the midst of school deserts, rendering the community not only helpless in providing and nourishing the bodies of their young people, but also the minds of their young people. How can you explain closing dozens of schools in the same neighborhood, disrupting the lives of young people so that babies who are 8 and 9 years old have been uprooted and sent to 4 and 5 different schools? And then the schools that they're sent to are overcrowded and destabilized, where teachers with experience with working with those communities that these students are come from and knowledge to actually help these children have been pushed out. So that the only familiar faces that these children see are the armed officers and police who patrol the perimeters of the school. If this is not a strategic war on our youth, how can you explain leaving the education of our children to interns, so-called teachers who have no training in the development of children, who have no understanding of the community dynamics in which they work, who are literally learning as they go? And what's worse is the ones who are making policy have this same 0 years of experience or training in education. Would they allow interns with 5 years of experience to make decisions and deals for a Fortune 500 company? Nope. No. But they have such low regard for our young people that this is not only a practice that's accepted, it's encouraged. How do you explain a government of elected officials allowing parents and grandparents to starve for 34 days because they want to do right by the children in their neighborhood? They want the children in their neighborhood to have access to a quality education in their neighborhood. If this is not an attack on our youth, how can you explain removing trauma centers and hospitals from neighborhoods which experience some of the highest mortality and homicide rates in the city? How do you explain taking resources away from special education children, autistic children, preschool children with HIV and AIDS? This is the evil, brothers and sisters, that we are dealing with. Right. This system is seeking to psychologically, if not physically, devour our children because they understand that the young people will be the ones who carry on this work. They are the ones who will continue to push this work forward. So the training and educating of our youth is vital to this movement. And it's why those corporate deformers seek to sabotage and destroy public education and any who wish to protect it. Because a population that is politically unaware and uneducated and lacks a critical consciousness is a compliant and easily controlled population. Why else would they, in ed policy, be going against every best practice, every legitimate piece of ed research, and yet keep funneling out failed policy after failed policy? If this is not about the purposeful sabotage of public education and of our children, why would you create policies to standardize and to test babies, 3 and 4-year-olds, preschool children, to test their college and career readiness? Early childhood expert Nancy Carlson-Page, she asked this poignant question. She said, if we take play, social interaction, and experimentation out of our schools, what kind of people are we producing? Not those with as much imagination, creativity, individual thinking, or original ideas. And is this precisely the point? If your goal is to maintain a 2-tier society with systems of race and class privilege, wouldn't it make sense to snuff out any kind of individual thinking, any kind of creativity or originality? And since this is innate in children, they seek to snuff it out before it can ever take root. Because let's just think for a minute, let's just think for a second about what might happen if we had young black and brown people with imagination, creativity, and critical understanding. They might do things like be voices in Chicago education and push legislators and politicians to pass laws that stop and change the punitive push-out system of discipline in our schools and instead restore justice and humanity to our students. Critical and creative young people might push presidential candidates to actually address the taboo topic of racial inequities in America and affirm that black lives do indeed matter. You see, these young independent thinkers might gather in mass in the streets of downtown, or they might walk out of their classrooms to protest budget cuts to their education. They might charge genocide and fearlessly hold the police accountable for the brutality that they exact from black and brown people. People with imagination and original ideas, they might band together on college campuses and recognize their powers as scholars and athletes and bring down racist leaders in their Ivy League towers. They might unite with parents and teachers across the country and refuse to be sorted and ranked, but instead lead the largest opt-out movement in the history of standardized testing. You see, that's what an educated and critically literate youth population could do. I recently went to to a meeting regarding the new Diet high school that will be an open, public open enrollment high school thanks to my family and the community of Browne. But in a very typical and disingenuous fashion, CPS has still tried to silence the voice of the Brownsville community and has made the high school with an arts focus, which is not what the community has asked for. But at that meeting with the CPS appointed leader of the school, I kept hearing constant talk about how an art-focused school would attract young people. And that phrase and ideology kept coming up again and again to the point where I felt disrespected. Because the unsaid assumption was that Black and brown youth only care about their Facebook and Instagram pages, and that they only care about whipping and nay-naying, and so that's what we have to attract them with in order to get them to come to school. As if a school with an academic focus on challenging their minds and equipping them to be critical thinkers and world leaders would be attractive enough. But you see, this disrespects our students, and it completely ignores the work and critically important work that these students are doing, not just here in Chicago, but across the country. They label our students as at risk, but the truth is that this current system of racism and white supremacy is at risk of crumbling when we have an educated, critically literate youth population. So it's our responsibility as educators and organizers to continually fortify and sustain this movement every day that we are in our classroom, every day that we are before young people. We must organize and work alongside our youth so that they are fully armed and prepared to defend and transform public education. I'll end with one of my favorite quotes. It's by Frederick Douglass. It's in my classroom. And it says, "It is not the light that is needed, but the fire. It is not the gentle shower, but the thunder. We need the storm, the whirlwind, and the earthquake." Yes, brothers and sisters, we are the fire. We come here to strengthen and reignite our blaze. We are the storm and the earthquake, because this is earth-shaking work that we must do in order to rock these racist, classist, patriarchal systems of oppression to their core. It is not time to comply. It is not the time to be quiet. As the young people say, it is time to turn up. It's time to turn up the heat of this movement. It's time to turn up our demands for justice. We must turn up our voices so that they rumble like deafening thunder, so loud that it is impossible to ignore, impossible to dismiss. The time is now. The time is now. Let's do it.
Thank you, Reverend Redeaux Smith. Dr. Redeaux Smith. Did you hear that? It was like part Black preacher, part Black teacher, part Black mama, just like laid it down. It was amazing, and I'm so privileged and glad to know you. Welcome again. Thank you all for coming. You set us on fire. Monique, thank you so much. This question that you asked, what might happen if we allow Black and brown students a creative and critical curriculum? That's the question that we have asked before today. That's the question that the Coalition to Revitalize Diet has been asking, and that's the question that drove us to create that amazing, amazing proposal. And so I want to introduce this next panel, and I will try to moderate. And by moderate, I mean I will sit here and I will ask a couple of questions of these amazing dynamic people, and we will all sit back with our mouths open and drooling because they are brilliant. Please come up. So this panel, Building Our Power, the Diet Hunger Strike, and the Movement for Education Justice. Trying to get my notes, people. So we know that the Diet Hunger Strike, a 34-day hunger strike, was a mere tactic to win the Diet Global Leadership and Green Technology School, which highlights the issue of sustainable schools here in Chicago and nationally. As a tactic, it was situated within a much larger fight for democratic, equitable, high-quality public schools for Black and brown children in particular, here in Chicago and nationally. So given that, right, given that, how can we think about the role and the impact of the hunger strike that it had on the local level, on a national level, for public schools? And then, how can we connect the opportunities that this fight allowed us to think about, connect the diet hunger strike for to other issues beyond public education? So we are asking the distinguished panel to answer these questions. First, to my left, we have Ms. Jeanette Taylor-Ramann, who is a mother of 5 and a new nana, not grandmother, I was corrected, of 1. She served on the Mollison LSC for 21 years, though she herself looks like 16. She's a parent leader with Kenwood Oakland Community Organization and a member of the Coalition to Revitalize Diet, Journey for Justice, Mid-South Education. She is busy, and she was a hunger striker. I'm going to ask you to hold your applause till the end, only because we are tight on time, because we gave the Reverend Redeaux Smith as much time as she needed. Next, we have to Jeanette's left, we have Jitu Browne, who is the national organizer for the Journey for Justice Alliance and a national leader in the movement for education justice for years. He is a Chicagoan. He was the former education organizer with COCO. On the Diet Local School Council, a member of the coalition, and of course a hunger striker. Next to Jitu, we have Dr. Pauline Lipman, who is a member of Teachers for Social Justice, a professor of education policy at UIC, a coalition member of the Coalition to Revitalize Diet. Pauline talks and writes about neoliberal education policies and the right to the city. Please welcome our distinguished panel. Amazing. I'm sorry, I'm Prudence Browne. I'm a member of TSJ, and I will try to do a humble job of moderating this morning. So I want to start with you, Jeanette.
And you were a hunger striker.
And I was a hunger striker, I'm sorry. It's not something to clap for. It was a desperate situation, people. Come on. Okay, so Jeanette, let's start with you. Why? What does this what did the diet hunger strike, what effect did it have on the local struggle, especially given that you live and work in the neighborhood?
The hunger strike really to me was a way of saying that Black and brown parents don't have a voice in the city of Chicago. While the majority of CPS is Black and brown students, we don't have a voice. We just don't. And so the hunger strike for me was a way of saying enough is enough. I've been on the local school council since I was a teen because I was a teen mother. And so the rhetoric of parents don't participate and parents don't care is a lie. And so we need to kill that rhetoric right away, right now. Because that's farthest from the truth. Who spends more time with my child than me, my child's teacher? And so to me, those are the people who should be making the education decisions. Not these corporate reformers, because that's what they are. And so to me, the diet hunger strike woke the sleeping giant in Chicago. Because I think a lot of times we're on our own different islands and it's not happening to my school, so it's really not my problem, which is farthest from the truth because greed doesn't stop. It continues. So now you got schools on the north side fighting Noble Charter. And so it was us before it was anybody. And so we have to stop these folks from thinking that, A, we don't work together, because during a hunger strike, I saw a rainbow coalition. So Black, white, brown, green, pink, everybody came out and supported us. And so I say thank you, because we would not have lasted. I lasted 30 days, because after 30 days, it was more than enough for my body. But we would not have lasted this hunger strike if it wasn't for you all. So I humbly, from the bottom of my heart, say thank you, thank you, thank you. The hunger strike was a moment in the movement. And so while it was a big thing to the city, we've been fighting school closing since 1999. I'm a part of Mollison Elementary's local school council. They've come from Mollison 3 times. And so we've just been fighting just for the basics. We're not talking about science labs and art labs and things of that nature. We're talking about not having split classrooms from 3rd to 8th grade. Those are the type of things that we fight in school. We're fighting to just get a library. Now we got a library with no librarian. And so it's the basic needs for us. And in one of the richest cities in the world, that everybody in this room should be angry, because that's just not good enough. How can you say your children are better than mine when the playing field is not level? It's not. And it's bad that we're in beautiful Kenwood, and a couple of streets away, you're going to build an art school that the community didn't ask for. And so we got to get the mindset of we are the people we have been waiting on. That's just it. We are the people. The person who needs to be the 4th Ward Alderman is probably sitting in this room. The person who needs to be the mayor is sitting in this room. The people who needs to sit on that elected school board that we're going to get, it's not what we're thinking about getting. We're going to get an elected school board. I stand in this room. And so for me, it's us supporting each other, us building that force on the ground. We have to. There is no other way in the city. It's either us or them. And I don't want to live in a city where, because of my income, it's decided whether I can't live here or not. I used to live in Bronzeville. I lived in Bronzeville my entire life until the last 3 years I was pushed into Woodlawn. And I was pushed that way because there's no rent cap in Bronzeville. So that means I'm paying $1,000 for a 1-bedroom and I got 5 kids. How does that help me? I'm a working mom. I was working 2 jobs at one point. And so is that fair to me? Is that fair that we live in a city where you get 2 tickets, you get a boot on your car? Your car is the way to get to a quality grocery store in my neighborhood. That's the way that I drive my kids out to a quality neighborhood school. That's the way that I get to work. And so 2 tickets takes that away from me because of what? Because I'm not making over $50,000. And so those are the things that we got to change, because it shouldn't be a us against them. It should be a we. It should be a we, and that's what it is.
Thank you, Jeanette. You have a couple more minutes, right, on your time. Can you talk about what led you to join the hunger strike?
Well, first of all, we talked about it 2 years ago. I actually was there on crack. I was like, a hunger strike? I eat a cookie every day. Right? And so, but it was because I kept sitting in rooms with folks who were making the decision, and I learned 2 things. It was not about my kids, and it was not about education. And so I got tired of hearing this, we got to do something. Have you all heard that? We got to do something. You got to fire my teachers who I've known since my kids were little. You got to fire this principal who's been in the building for the last 4 years fighting for me. You got to keep changing things in the school. No, change some of the people who sit on the 5th floor. Those are the people you need to change. Change the people who are on that appointed school board. Those are the people who need to change, not the people in my school. And so I get tired of hearing, we got to do something. We got to do something. You're absolutely right. And we got to start at the Department of Education by getting rid of already done. That's probably number 1. He didn't get it right for the kids in Chicago. How the heck did he get to D.C.? I'm still trying to figure that out. Even though they fired him on his day off, they got somebody else who doesn't know what they're doing. And so we really, we have an opportunity. It's election time. Everybody's coming out. They got something to say. Make sure that before you vote for these folks, it's our foundation.
Thank you, Jeanette. Thank you. And to the other 2 speakers here in the front, she's our timekeeper, okay? Because we have another reverend coming up who likes to preach and talk. Jitu. Pauline. I'm kidding. It's you, Jitu, I'm talking about. Okay, Jitu, if you can answer kind of the same question, but talk about the impact on a national level. Given that it is still too early to completely sum up the totality of the hunger strike, right? Like, we can't completely say what has been won and lost yet, but we can start to think about what the implications and the impact.
Yeah, I mean, because I think a part of it is also we process as a group, but then you also go through kind of your personal process, kind of how it impacted you physically, spiritually. I think Monique spoke to it. I know what hate feels like. I know what it feels like. On the 25th day of the hunger strike, to give Lincoln Elementary School a $21 million annex while we're starving in Washington Park was like the ultimate form of hate to me, but also privilege that they're shielded, from the people. So so just my processing has been kind of deep in regards to that experience. But I think the way that, Alice Walker has a quote, no one is your friend who demands your silence or denies your right to grow. And no matter where you go throughout the United States, my work with Journey for Justice has taught me this. I've seen it, I've worked with people consistently, that quote can just flow through the colonization of our communities in public education, through every city you could think of, Boston, Baltimore, Maryland, Detroit, Michigan, New Orleans, Louisiana, Kill Michael, Mississippi, doesn't have 3,000 people in it, they're closing schools. Wichita, Kansas, Oakland, California, wherever we are, you see this happening. What I'm excited about is that parents, this hunger strike was, I guess, public enough that parents and educators have been asking to kind of talk to the hunger strikers. So we've been going to cities. Me and Jeanette were just in Dallas, Texas the other day, talking to parents about, the impact of the hunger strike in sustainable community schools. So I think what I hope Prudence comes from it, nationally and locally, is that the hunger strike was a tactic, but it was not a gimmick. I mean, it was not, let's see how far we can, it was a serious tactic and struggle. Because we've met with every bureaucrat, we've met with every spineless politician, we've gone above and beyond, and to Jeanette's point, our voices don't matter. And I think there's an acceptable protest playbook that corporate colonizers have. And I think we need to burn that playbook. I think we need to burn it. We need to stop playing the game, and we need to change it. And we change it by being bold. We change it by understanding that this is not going to be comfortable for us. It's not, let's go to a protest, then I go home at 6 o'clock and everything's all good. No, this is, children are being harmed by this. Children have been killed as a result of schools closing. We know that for a fact. In Brownsville, we know that for a fact. Children in New Orleans have died as a result of not having a neighborhood school and having to cross through weeds that were 7 feet tall to catch a bus to go across the city. Children in Philadelphia have died because they're building 2 new prisons while they're closing 24 schools and they're cutting public services so the children don't even have a school nurse in the building. So I maintain that the impact that this has nationally is what we make it. The more we talk with parents and young people and community residents and educators about the need to struggle, the ability of regular people to push powerful interests to the limit, the ability of people to have emotional commitment in a hyper-segregated city like Chicago. I just want to echo Jeanette's thanks because it was educational to me. See, because in the organizing community, if I can speak candidly, we give token support to each other. We give token support to each other. I'm just telling the truth. We don't struggle together. We don't wage struggle together. We go to each other's rally and we get a little bit of victory, and that little victory we manufacture it like it was some major victory, and we keep it moving. Is that too candid? Okay, but that's the truth. This hunger strike was deep because you saw people from all over the city making an emotional commitment to a fight. In a city that again in Chicago, that's probably one of the more segregated cities in the world. So that was inspiring. I think it should be inspiring to all of us in regards to the possibilities. I saw white mothers pissed, coming out there every day, bringing us juice. They talk about the black and brown divide, but mothers from Little Village brought us broth almost every night. A Puerto Rican family every day was at the hunger strike site. So it was important. It was important about the possibilities. What kind of world do we want? At the end of the day, what kind of world do we want? I maintain that people in this room want a world where we can work together, where we can love, play, joke, struggle together, and you don't have to change who you are in order to get along with me. My child doesn't have to assimilate in order to be accepted by you. My child should be proud to be black. He should be proud to be who God made him. All of our children should be proud to be that and be accepted for who they are. That's not the world we live in today. It's not.
Thanks, Jitu, and thanks for keeping it tonight. So, Pauline, thinking about how we move forward, can you talk about this hunger strike and the connection to, say, the sustainable community school movement, the ERSB, and other issues?
Yeah, you see this? These are my notes, but everyone said so much better than I could, everything that I was even thinking about saying tonight. So I was teaching during the hunger strike, at least during the last half of the hunger strike, teaching and then trying to come down to diet. And my students, when the hunger strikers called off the strike, they asked, so did we win or lose? And I told them it's too soon to know, which I think is what Jitu just said. It's too soon to know. It's too early to know. We can't know the impact yet. Now, what we do know is that the hunger strike, as Jitu has said, inspired people all around the country and beyond. So we got solidarity messages from Chile, we got solidarity messages from Puerto Rico, as well as and other places, from South Africa. So it inspired people. And it inspired people because I think it showed that parents and community members and teachers have the courage to stand up, to draw the line, to refuse to allow bankers and CEOs and opportunist politicians to disregard their children. It was an act of defiance that inspired people. Because in the struggle we're in, and Jitu just said this, but I'm going to say it again, we need all kinds of tactics. But ultimately, we can't play by their rules. And the hunger strike did not play by their rules. Another thing is that the hunger strike made it plain, as if we needed another example, that, as Monique said, the Board of Education demonstrated their cynical contempt for black children and black communities and black schools. I remember being at the board meeting when Jeanette passed out, and we were frantic to get an ambulance to come for 15 minutes, and the board members sat up there in their chairs. She was right next to them, and they did not even look over. And that's the truth. So, to them, black lives do not matter, as Monique said. When mothers and grandmothers have to starve themselves and for their children and other children to get a quality education in Chicago in 2015, it is time for an elected school board representative of the children who attend Chicago public schools and accountable to the people of Chicago. The plan for the Diane High School of Global Leadership and Green Technology gave us a vision. This is another win from this struggle. It gave us a vision for sustainable community schools. It showed that parents and community members, along with education partners and community partners, can reinvent the public schools that our children deserve. It showed us that there is wisdom beyond the nonsense in these corporate boardrooms. So as many of us who had some small role in the hunger strike have been summing up, the hunger strike was a powerful moment in a long-term struggle. There are moments in struggles, collective acts of bravery and persistence and determination that galvanize and energize, and you can't know right away their outcome or how they will impact political consciousness and organizing and the accumulation of power. We don't know that yet. I think the diet struggle also reminds us of the protracted nature of the battle we're in. This struggle will not be won in a day or a year. The hunger strike wasn't about one school, it was about a whole agenda to privatize public education. We began fighting that in 2004 with Renaissance 2010. That was 10 years ago, 11 years ago now. It's a protracted struggle because the stakes are so high. Because it's not just about diet, and it's not even just about public education. And I think that was one of the most inspiring things to me about Monique's talk. She made that really, really clear. As we have been saying, it's about gentrification and displacement and disinvestment and economic and racial apartheid and making Chicago a global city that does not include the residents of Bronzeville or Pilsen or East Garfield Park. It's pretty clear that Bronzeville is on the front line of gentrification, and it's no accident that Diet is located in beautiful Washington Park. That's part of the plan. So the movement to defend and transform public education is part of a much larger struggle for the city itself. I think Jeanette said it's either us or them. It's either us or them. For who can live here, how our young people will grow up here, or even who can live. We are actually contesting the corporate neoliberal agenda to remake this city and cities all across this country and actually across the world for the rich and powerful. That agenda is anti-black, anti-Latino, anti-immigrant, anti-working class, anti-poor, anti-community, and anti-life. So we are in a battle for the kind of city we'll have, the kind of world we want to have. And that's why the fight for diet was so significant and why the stakes are so high. So the question for us, is how to build our power and how to maintain the power we have. The fight for public education is actually escalated since the hunger strike. So I'm out of time, so I'm going to be really short. So we've been organizing for sustainable community schools, for a direct alternative to privatization and school closings. Students are at the forefront of resistance of stripping our schools of resources and teachers. This is a shout out to the student walkouts. And we have a movement for an elected representative school board. We can get an elected representative school board, people, but we have to work for it. We have to make these politicians own up to what they say they're for. And the Chicago Teachers Union is on the verge of, where's my flyer? A critical battle for the schools we all deserve. Every person in this room needs to be at the CTU rally next Monday at 5 o'clock. If you're not there, you're not part of it. But I want to say my last point, which is I want to say something about the direction we have to move. And that is we have to move to a multi-issue movement. And this is what Monique was talking about. We need to link the struggle for sustainable community schools and democracy and education to other issues because, as Monique said, the issues are linked. Schools, food deserts, lack of jobs, low-wage jobs, poverty wage jobs, lack of health care, lack of mental health services. The issues are linked. We can't fight one without fighting them all. And we understand that in our heads. I think one of the big tasks is figuring out how we make that real on the ground and how we begin to link up these struggles. Because we're all fighting around the same connected issues and we're fighting against the same powerful interests, the mayor, the hedge fund operators, the bankers, the real estate developers who run this city and run this country and are responsible for the misery that they're reaching. So I want to end by saying that we saw a really powerful example of this during the hunger strike, when the hunger strikers went to the demand for justice for Rekia Boyd, and then the Black Lives Matter movement, BYP 100, marched to Diet. There we saw a living example of the kind of movement we need to build.
Thank you.